The courtroom doors burst open, and the crowd outside erupted into a frenzy. Rain pounded Chicago's magnificent mile, but it couldn't drown out the shouts. "Liar!" screamed a woman clutching a soaked placard. "Justice for Maya!" chanted others, their voices a raw chorus of rage. Maya Thompson stood at the center of the storm, her dark skin glistening under the downpour, her eyes fixed on the man descending the courthouse steps, Richard Caldwell, her husband of 15 years. Former husband. Now, he'd traded her for a younger woman, a blonde heiress named Chloe Summers, and left Maya with nothing but a broken heart and a foreclosure notice. But today, Maya wasn't the broken one. Today, she was a wildfire. Richard adjusted his tie, his smug grin faltering as he spotted her. Flanked by his legal team, he tried to push through the crowd, but the reporters swarmed. "Mr. Caldwell, any comment on the allegations?" One shouted, "Is it true you hid assets during the divorce?" Another pressed. His eyes darted, searching for Chloe, who was nowhere in sight. Maya's lips curled into a faint, dangerous smile. She'd waited for this moment, planned it, and now the trap was closing. 15 years ago, Maya had been a rising star at a Chicago law firm, her brilliance outshining her peers. Richard, a wealthy real estate mogul, had swept her off her feet with promises of a shared empire. She'd believed him, loved him, built a life with him. They'd faced the world together, or so she thought. Whispers of gold digger followed her, a black woman married to a white tycoon. She ignored them, pouring her soul into their marriage, their home, their dreams. But Richard's affection had been a mirage. 2 years ago, he'd blindsided her with divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences. The truth. Chloe, a 25-year-old socialite who'd caught his eye at a gala. Maya was discarded, left with a pittance while Richard and Chloe flaunted their new life. The divorce had been brutal. Richard's lawyers painted Maya as unstable, a leech who'd contributed nothing to his fortune. The judge, an old friend of Richard's, sided with him, awarding Maya a fraction of their shared assets. She'd lost their Lakeview mansion, her savings, her dignity. Worse, the whispers grew louder. Racial slurs scrawled on her car, anonymous letters calling her undeserving. Chicago's elite, Richard's circle, closed ranks. Maya, once a respected attorney, was reduced to a paralegal job, scraping by in a one-bedroom apartment. But she wasn't broken. She was biding her time. In the shadows, Maya had uncovered something, a thread that could unravel Richard's empire. A former colleague, Jamal, had tipped her off. Richard had hidden millions in offshore accounts during the divorce, falsifying records to cheat her out of her share. It was fraud, plain and simple, but proving it would take more than whispers. Maya spent nights poring over documents, tracing transactions, building a case. She wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for every woman who'd been discarded, every person judged by their skin instead of their worth. She partnered with a tenacious young lawyer, Elena Ruiz, who believed in her cause. Together, they'd filed a new lawsuit, one that accused Richard of fraud, perjury, and racketeering. Today's hearing was the first skirmish. Richard's team had tried to dismiss the case, but Elena's evidence leaked bank records. Witness testimonies had convinced the judge to let it proceed. The crowd outside wasn't just protesters. It was a movement. Maya's story had spread on social media, igniting fury among those who'd faced similar betrayals. Hashtags like Justice for Maya trended, and reporters smelled blood. Richard's fortune, his reputation, his future, they were all on the line. As Richard reached the bottom of the steps, a reporter shoved a microphone in his face. "Did you think Maya wouldn't fight back?" Richard's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his eyes locking with Maya's. She didn't flinch. "You underestimated me," she said, her voice cutting through the rain. "You thought I'd stay silent, like a good little wife. But I'm not your wife anymore. I'm your reckoning." The crowd roared, and Richard's face paled. He pushed past, his security team hustling him into a waiting SUV. Maya watched him go, her heart pounding but steady. This was just the beginning. She'd spent 2 years in the dark, but now the light was hers. Elena touched her arm, whispering, "We've got him, Maya. This is only round 1. Inside the courthouse, the judge's gavel still echoed in Maya's mind. The case would go to trial, and she'd make sure every secret Richard buried saw daylight. She thought of the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the lies he'd spun to keep her down. She thought of Chloe, who'd smirked at her during the divorce, calling her replaceable. Maya wasn't replaceable. She was unstoppable. As the rain slowed, Maya turned to the crowd, raising a fist. "This isn't just my fight," she said, her voice amplified by a megaphone someone thrust into her hands. "It's for everyone who's been cheated, erased, or told they don't matter. We matter. And we're coming for what's ours." The cheers were deafening, but Maya's mind was already on the next step. Richard had built his empire on lies, and she'd tear it down brick by brick. She didn't want his money for herself, she wanted justice. For her. For the community that rallied behind her. For the truth. The storm might rage, but Maya Thompson was its eye, calm and unrelenting. 3 months later, Chicago's winter bit harder than usual, but the heat of Maya's case burned brighter. The trial loomed, set for spring, and the city was a pressure cooker. Social media buzzed with justice for Maya, while Richard's allies in the real estate world circled wagons, dismissing her as a vindictive ex. But Maya wasn't playing their game. She was rewriting the rules. Her apartment, a cramped walk-up in Englewood, had become a war room. Stacks of documents covered every surface: bank statements, emails, deposition transcripts. Elena, her lawyer, worked late into the nights, her laptop glowing as she cross-referenced Richard's financial records. Jamal, the whistleblower, had risked his career to smuggle more evidence, a ledger detailing Richard's offshore accounts in the Caymans. It was a gold mine, but dangerous. Richard's lawyers were sharks, and they'd already tried to intimidate Jamal with lawsuits. He didn't budge. "This is bigger than me," he told Maya. "It's about showing guys like him they can't just erase people." Maya's fight wasn't just legal, it was personal. She'd grown up in Bronzeville, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a bus driver, clawing her way to a law degree through sheer grit. She'd faced racism her whole life, subtle slights in boardrooms, overt hostility in courtrooms. Marrying Richard hadn't shielded her. It had exposed her to a different kind of prejudice, the kind that hid behind smiles and whispers. When he left her for Chloe, the betrayal wasn't just about love, it was about power. He'd thought he could discard her, a black woman who'd outshone him, and the world would applaud. He was wrong. Elena burst through the door one evening, her coat dusted with snow. "We've got something big," she said, tossing a USB drive onto the table. "A former accountant from Richard's firm. She's willing to testify." The accountant, Sarah Nguyen, had worked for Richard's company for a decade before being fired for asking too many questions. She'd kept copies of emails showing Richard's orders to funnel money into shell companies during the divorce. It was the smoking gun they needed, but Sarah was scared. Richard's reach was long, and his allies weren't above threats. Maya met Sarah at a diner in Uptown, away from prying eyes. The woman was nervous, her hands shaking as she sipped coffee. I didn't want to get involved, Sarah admitted. But what he did to you's not right. I saw how he talked about you. How he laughed with his buddies about upgrading to Chloe. It made my skin crawl. Maya listened, her heart a mix of gratitude and rage. Sarah's testimony could tip the scales, but it came with a cost. If I do this, Sarah said, I need protection. He's got friends everywhere. Maya promised to keep her safe, though she wasn't sure how. Elena was already working pro bono, and Maya's savings were gone. But the community stepped up. A crowdfunding campaign, sparked by a viral post from a local activist, raised thousands to cover legal fees and security for witnesses like Sarah. Strangers sent letters of support, some sharing their own stories of betrayal and discrimination. Maya read each one, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just her revenge, it was a reckoning for everyone who'd been silenced. Meanwhile, Richard was unraveling. His polished facade cracked as the media dug deeper. A local news outlet ran a story on his shady business deals, linking him to gentrification schemes that had displaced Black and Latino families in Chicago's South Side. Protesters picketed his downtown office, chanting Maya's name. Chloe, his new fiancée, was nowhere to be seen, dodging cameras and questions. Rumors swirled that she was rethinking the engagement, spooked by the mounting scandal. Richard's investors, nervous about the bad press, started pulling out. His empire was teetering, and Maya hadn't even fired her biggest shot yet. One night, as Maya pored over documents, her phone buzzed with a blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice rasped, "Drop the case, or you'll regret it." Her blood ran cold, but she didn't flinch. "You don't scare me," she said, her voice steady. "I've already lost everything. What's left to take?" The line went dead. She told Elena, who insisted on hiring a private investigator to trace the call. It led nowhere, but the threat lit a fire in Maya. Richard was desperate, and desperate men made mistakes. The next morning, Elena uncovered another bombshell, a recorded conversation between Richard and his CFO, discussing how to bury Maya's claims by bribing a witness. The recording was grainy, but damning. Elena grinned, her eyes fierce. "This is it, Maya. We've got him dead to rights." They filed a motion to admit the recording as evidence, knowing it would blow the case wide open. The trial was weeks away, and the stakes were higher than ever. Maya felt the weight of its city watching, the community rallying, the ghosts of her past demanding justice. She stood at her window, staring at the snow-covered streets. Englewood wasn't the magnificent mile, but it was home. It was where she'd learned to fight, to survive. Richard had thought he could break her, but he'd only made her stronger. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Sarah, for Jamal, for every person who'd been told they didn't belong. The trial would be a war, and Maya was ready to win. Spring broke over Chicago, but the city felt like it was holding its breath. The trial began in a packed courtroom, the air thick with anticipation. Maya sat at the plaintiff's table, her back straight, her eyes locked on the judge. Richard sat across the room, his face a mask of confidence, but his twitching fingers betrayed him. Chloe was absent, her absence a loud silence. The gallery was a mix of supporters and skeptics, their whispers a low hum. Outside, protesters waved signs, their chants filtering through the windows. This wasn't just a trial, it was a spectacle. Elena opened with a blistering statement, laying out Richard's fraud, the offshore accounts, the falsified records, the lies that had stripped Maya of her rightful share. She played the recorded conversation, and the courtroom gasped as Richard's voice echoed, cold and calculating, plotting to bury Maya. His lawyers objected. claiming the recording was inadmissible. But the judge overruled. Maya's heart surged. The truth was finally clawing its way out. Richard's team fought back, painting Maya as a scorned woman out for revenge. Their lead attorney, a slick man named Gregory Holt, sneered as he questioned her. "Isn't it true, Ms. Thompson, that you're driven by jealousy? That you couldn't accept your husband's new life?" Maya's jaw tightened, but she didn't waver. "I'm driven by justice," she said, her voice clear. "Richard stole from me, lied to the court, and thought he could get away with it. I'm here to prove he can't." The first witness was Sarah Gwen, the accountant. She took the stand, her voice trembling but resolute. She detailed Richard's orders to hide assets, producing emails that corroborated her story. Gregory tried to discredit her, suggesting she was fired for incompetence, but Sarah held her ground. "I was fired because I wouldn't lie for him," she said. The jury leaned forward, their faces unreadable but attentive. Maya felt a flicker of hope. Sarah's testimony was a crack in Richard's armor. Then came Jamal, the whistleblower. His testimony was electric, detailing how Richard had bragged about outsmarting Maya during the divorce. He presented the ledger from the Cayman accounts, each entry a nail in Richard's coffin. Gregory attacked Jamal's credibility, hinting at a personal grudge. But Jamal was unflappable. "I'm here because it's right," he said. "Maya deserves the truth." The jury scribbled notes, and Maya saw one juror, a middle-aged black woman, nod slightly. It was a small gesture, but it fueled her. The prosecution's witnesses were less convincing. Richard's CFO claimed the offshore accounts were standard business practice, but stumbled under Elena's cross-examination. A financial analyst hired by Richard's team tried to muddy the waters with jargon, but Elena dismantled his arguments, exposing inconsistencies. The courtroom felt like a chessboard, and Maya's side was gaining ground. But Richard wasn't done. Midway through the trial, his team dropped a bombshell, a surprise witness, a former colleague of Maya's named Vanessa Reed. She claimed Maya had been unstable during the marriage, prone to outbursts, and had threatened Richard after the divorce. The accusation stung, painting Maya as unhinged. Vanessa's testimony was polished, her tears perfectly timed. The jury shifted uncomfortably, and Maya's heart sank. She'd worked with Vanessa years ago, considered her a friend. The betrayal cut deep. Elena whispered, "We'll handle this." During cross-examination, she pressed Vanessa, uncovering that Richard had paid her a hefty sum to testify. The revelation didn't erase the damage, but it planted doubt. Maya took the stand next, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. She recounted the racism she'd faced, the slurs, the isolation. She described Richard's betrayal, not just as a husband, but as a partner who'd vowed to stand by her. "He didn't just leave me," she said. "He tried to erase me. But I'm still here." The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone. Even Gregory Holt looked shaken. Maya stepped down, her legs trembling but her spirit unbroken. Outside, the crowd had grown, their signs now reading, "Truth wins." The trial was far from over, but Maya felt the tide turning. Richard's lies were crumbling, and she was the one wielding the hammer. That night, Elena and Maya strategized in a diner, their coffee growing cold. "We're close," Elena said. "But Richard's desperate. He'll try something dirty." Maya nodded, her mind racing. She'd heard rumors of Richard meeting with shady fixers, men who could make problems disappear. She wasn't naive, she knew the risks. But she also knew the power of the truth. The community behind her, the strangers who'd become allies. the stories pouring in from others who'd faced similar injustices. They were her armor. As they left the diner, a car slowed beside them. Its window cracked just enough for a voice to hiss. "Back off, or you're done." Maya froze, but Elena grabbed her arm, pulling her away. "They're scared," Elena said. "That means we're winning." Maya wasn't so sure, but she refused to let fear stop her. Richard had underestimated her once. He wouldn't get a second chance. The trial's second week was a battlefield. Richard's team doubled down, spinning a narrative that Maya was a master manipulator, orchestrating a smear campaign to ruin him. They produced doctored emails suggesting Maya had tried to blackmail Richard before the divorce. The jury murmured, and Maya's stomach churned. Elena objected fiercely, arguing the emails were fabricated, but the damage was done. Doubt lingered like smoke. Maya saw it in the jurors' eyes, in the way they avoided her gaze. Richard's smirk returned, and it took everything in her not to lunge across the courtroom. Elena fought back with forensic evidence. A tech expert testified that the emails were manipulated, their metadata inconsistent with Maya's devices. The expert's testimony was dry but devastating, exposing Richard's team as liars. The jury perked up, and Maya felt a spark of hope. But the real game-changer came when Elena called a surprise witness, Chloe Summers. The courtroom buzzed as Chloe took the stand, her face pale, her designer dress out of place in the gritty proceedings. Richard's eyes widened, his composure cracking. Chloe's testimony was reluctant but damning. She admitted Richard had bragged about hiding assets to teach Maya a lesson. She'd stayed silent out of loyalty, but the pressure of the trial and the public's scorn had broken her. "I didn't sign up for this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He lied to me too." The revelation hit like a grenade. Richard's lawyers scrambled, their objections frantic, but the judge allowed Chloe's testimony. Maya watched Richard slump in his seat, his empire crumbling in real time. Social media exploded, with Chloe Speaks trending alongside Justice for Maya. Protesters outside chanted louder, their voices a drumbeat of reckoning. Maya felt a strange mix of triumph and pity. Chloe wasn't her enemy, she was just another woman caught in Richard's web. But Richard wasn't finished. His team called a parade of character witnesses, business partners, friends, even a pastor who painted him as a pillar of the community. They dismissed Maya's claims as exaggerated and hinted at her instability. The pastor's testimony stung most, his sanctimonious tone implying Maya's pain was her fault. "She didn't trust in God's plan," he said. Maya's nails dug into her palms. She'd trusted in her marriage, in her husband, and he'd betrayed her. God had nothing to do with it. Elena countered with witnesses from Chicago's South Side, residents displaced by Richard's gentrification schemes. They spoke of broken promises, of communities torn apart for profit. One woman, a grandmother named Loretta, wept as she described losing her home of 40 years. "He didn't care about us," she said. "He only cared about his money." The jury listened, their faces softening. Maya saw the middle-aged black juror nod again, her eyes fierce. The tide was turning, but it was a slow, brutal grind. Outside the courtroom, the threats escalated. Maya's car tires were slashed, and a brick sailed through her apartment window with a note, "Stop or else." She reported it to the police, but they were slow to act, citing lack of evidence. Elena hired a security guard, paid for by the crowdfunding campaign, but Maya refused to hide. "If I run, he wins," she told Elena. Instead, she spoke at a rally in Bronzeville, her voice raw but powerful. "This isn't just about me," she said to the crowd. "It's about all of us, black, brown, poor, pushed aside. We're not invisible anymore. The rally drew hundreds, their signs a sea of defiance. A local artist painted a mural of Maya on a community center wall, her face fierce, the words "Justice demands truth" beneath it. The image went viral, a symbol of resistance. But the attention came with a cost. Maya's phone buzzed with hate messages, racial slurs, death threats. She blocked the numbers, but the words lingered. She wasn't just fighting Richard. She was fighting a system that saw her as less than. Elena uncovered another lead, a paper trail linking Richard to a corrupt city official who'd helped him skirt taxes. The official, facing his own scandal, was willing to talk in exchange for leniency. His testimony could tie Richard to broader crimes, turning the case into a federal matter. Maya hesitated. Going after Richard's fortune was one thing. Destroying his life was another. But then she remembered the slurs, the betrayal, the years she'd lost. She gave Elena the green light. "Let's finish this," she said. As the trial neared its climax, Maya felt the weight of every eye on her. The jury, the judge, the city, they were all watching. She wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a warrior. Richard had thought he could bury her, but she was rising, and she was bringing his empire down with her. The final days of the trial would decide everything, and Maya was ready to face the fire. The courtroom was a pressure cooker as the trial's final days unfolded. Maya sat ramrod straight, her heart a drumbeat of anticipation and dread. Richard's empire was teetering, but he was a cornered animal, and cornered animals were dangerous. His legal team, led by Gregory Holt, unleashed a last-ditch assault, accusing Maya of orchestrating a witch hunt fueled by racial politics. They paraded experts who claimed Richard's offshore accounts were legal, twisting facts into knots. The jury's faces were unreadable, and Maya felt the ground shift beneath her. Elena fought back with surgical precision. She called the corrupt city official, Councilman Derek Walsh, to the stand. Walsh, sweating under the courtroom lights, admitted to helping Richard hide assets in exchange for kickbacks. His testimony was a bombshell, linking Richard to a web of corruption that stretched beyond the divorce. The jury gasped, and Richard's face turned ashen. Gregory objected, claiming Walsh was unreliable, but the judge allowed the testimony. The room felt electric, every word a spark. Maya took the stand again, this time to rebut Richard's narrative. Gregory grilled her, his questions laced with venom. "Isn't it true you're using your race to gain sympathy?" he asked, his tone dripping with disdain. The courtroom tensed, but Maya didn't flinch. "My race isn't a weapon," she said, her voice steady. "It's a fact. Richard used his power to cheat me, to cheat justice. I'm here to take it back." Her words hung in the air, and she saw the black juror's eyes glisten. The truth was her shield, and she wielded it fiercely. The closing arguments were a clash of worlds. Elena painted Richard as a predator who'd exploited Maya's trust, hiding his wealth to leave her destitute. She held up the ledger, the emails, the recording, each piece a brick in the wall of evidence. "This isn't just about money," she said. "It's about a man who thought he could erase a woman because of who she is. Maya Thompson is not erasable." The jury nodded, some visibly moved. Gregory's closing was a masterclass in deflection. He called Maya's case a vendetta, accusing her of manipulating the public with sob stories. He leaned on Richard's status, his charity donations, his upstanding reputation. But his words fell flat, overshadowed by the evidence. Richard's smirk was gone, replaced by a haunted look. Maya met his eyes, unflinching. He'd underestimated her, and now he was paying the price. The jury deliberated for 3 agonizing days. Maya barely slept, haunted by the threats, the slurs, the weight of the city's eyes. She spent hours at the Bronzeville Community Center, surrounded by supporters who'd become family. Loretta, the grandmother displaced by Richard's schemes, brought her homemade cornbread, saying, "You're fighting for all of us, baby." Maya hugged her, tears prickling. This was bigger than her pine, it was a movement. On the 3rd day, the jury returned. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. The foreman, a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses, stood. "We find the defendant, Richard Caldwell, guilty of fraud, perjury, and racketeering." The room erupted. Maya's breath caught, her hands trembling. Elena grabbed her arm, whispering, "We did it." Richard's head dropped, his lawyers frozen. The judge ordered a full audit of Richard's assets, with Maya entitled to her rightful share millions he'd hidden. The gavel fell, and it was over. Outside, the crowd roared, their cheers a tidal wave. Reporters swarmed Maya, but she waved them off, needing air. She stepped onto the courthouse steps, the same steps where she'd faced Richard months ago. The rain was gone, replaced by a clear spring sky. The wooden signpost still stood, its yellow text, "Justice demands truth," faded but defiant. Maya raised a fist, and the crowd answered, their voices a chorus of victory. But the victory was bittersweet. The trial had exposed Richard's lies, but it had also exposed Chicago's underbelly: racism, corruption, power protecting power. Maya's phone still buzzed with hate, and she knew the threats wouldn't stop. She wasn't naive. She'd won a battle, not the war. But she'd shown the world that she could fight, that she could win. And she wasn't done. That night, Maya and Elena celebrated quietly in Englewood. They toasted with cheap wine, surrounded by the war room's documents. "This is just the start," Elena said. "Richard's going down, but there's more to do." Maya nodded, her mind already turning. The money she'd won wasn't for her, it was for the community, for the displaced, for the silenced. She'd start a foundation, rebuild what Richard had torn apart. The fight was far from over, but Maya was ready for the next round. The verdict was a seismic shift, but the aftershocks were just beginning. Richard's empire unraveled faster than anyone expected. The audit ordered by the judge exposed a labyrinth of fraud, millions siphoned into offshore accounts, properties bought under false names, deals greased with bribes. Federal investigators swooped in, turning Maya's civil case into a criminal one. Richard faced charges that could land him in prison for decades. His investors fled, his companies collapsed, and his name became a synonym for scandal. Chicago's elite, once his allies, distanced themselves, leaving him radioactive. Maya watched it unfold from her Englewood apartment, now a symbol of her resilience. The money from the settlement, over $20 million, started flowing in, but she didn't touch it for herself. She'd already decided its purpose: a foundation to support displaced families and fund legal aid for those fighting injustice. She named it Truth Rising, a nod to the signpost outside the courthouse. The community rallied behind her, with volunteers offering to help run the foundation. Loretta, the grandmother from the trial, became its first board member, her fierce spirit a perfect fit. But the victory came with scars. The hate messages hadn't stopped, and Maya's security guard was now a constant presence. A local news outlet published a hit piece, calling her a race-baiting opportunist. The words stung, but she refused to let them define her. She spoke at community centers, schools, churches, sharing her story and urging others to fight. "They want us to stay quiet," she told a packed room in Bronzeville. "But silence is their weapon, not ours." The crowd erupted, their applause a shield against the hate. Richard, meanwhile, was a ghost of his former self. Paparazzi caught him leaving a seedy motel, his tailored suits replaced by wrinkled shirts. Chloe had left him, her engagement ring pawned to cover legal fees. Rumors swirled that she was writing a tell-all book, eager to cash in on the scandal. Richard's lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the feds weren't budging. His trial was set for the fall, and the evidence, much of it from Maya's case, was airtight. He'd lost everything: his fortune, his status, his future. Maya's foundation took shape quickly. She hired Elena as its legal director, and together they launched programs to help families like Loretta's reclaim their homes. They partnered with local activists to fight gentrification, using Richard's own tactics against him: public pressure, legal challenges, community organizing. The mural of Maya on the community center wall became a pilgrimage site, with people leaving flowers and notes of gratitude. One read, "You showed us we can win." Maya kept it on her fridge, a reminder of why she fought. But the threats grew darker. One night, a Molotov cocktail shattered against her building's stoop, the flames licking the steps before neighbors doused them. The police called it a random act, but Maya knew better. She moved to a safer apartment, paid for by the foundation, but refused to leave Inglewood. "This is my home," she told Elena. "They don't get to chase me out." Her security guard doubled his shifts, and Jamal set up a neighborhood watch. The community closed ranks, protecting their own. Maya's story spread beyond Chicago. National news outlets picked it up, framing her as a David against Richard's Goliath. She did interviews reluctantly, wary of being reduced to a symbol. "I'm not a hero," she told a reporter. "I'm just a woman who refused to lose." But the world saw her differently. Invitations poured in: speaking gigs, awards, even a book deal. She turned most down, focusing on the foundation. The work was grueling, but it gave her purpose. She wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was rebuilding a community. One evening, Maya visited the courthouse steps, now quiet under a summer moon. The signpost was gone, removed by the city, but its words, "Justice demands truth," lived in her. She thought of Richard, alone in his motel, his empire dust. She thought of Chloe, chasing fame on his ruins. And she thought of herself, a girl from Bronzeville who dared to fight a giant. She didn't feel joy, but she felt peace. The fight had cost her sleepless nights, lost friends, scars no one saw, but it had given her something greater: a voice. As she walked away, a young girl approached, clutching a notebook. "Are you Maya Thompson?" she asked, eyes wide. Maya nodded, and the girl thrust the notebook forward. "Can you sign it? I want to be a lawyer like you." Maya smiled, her heart swelling. She signed the notebook, adding, "Keep fighting." The girl beamed, and Maya knew this was why she'd endured. Not for revenge, but for the future. Summer turned to fall, and Chicago braced for Richard's criminal trial. The city was still buzzing from Maya's victory, but the spotlight had shifted. Richard's downfall was now a national story, a cautionary tale of greed and hubris. Maya stayed out of the headlines, focusing on truth rising. The foundation had already helped dozens of families, funding legal battles and providing grants to rebuild homes lost to gentrification. But Maya knew the work was just beginning. The system that had protected Richard for so long was still intact, and she was determined to chip away at it. Richard's trial was a circus. Cameras swarmed the courthouse, and protesters, now a mix of Maya's supporters and those decrying cancel culture, clashed outside. Richard took the stand, his voice hollow, claiming he was a victim of a vindictive ex and a biased system. The jury wasn't buying it. The evidence from Maya's case ledgers, Emails. Testimonies formed the backbone of the prosecution. Councilman Walsh's plea deal added fuel, detailing Richard's bribes and backroom deals. By the trial's end, Richard was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and racketeering. The judge sentenced him to 15 years, a stunning fall for a man once untouchable. Maya didn't attend the trial. She didn't need to see Richard's defeat in person. She'd already won. Instead, she was in Bronzeville, breaking ground on a community center funded by Truth Rising. The event drew hundreds, with Loretta cutting the ribbon and Jamal emceeing. The mural of Maya watched over the crowd, its colors brighter in the autumn sun. "This is for us," Maya told the crowd, her voice steady. "Not just for me, but for every person who's been told they don't matter. We're building something new." The center became a hub for activism, offering legal clinics, job training, and youth programs. Maya hired local staff, including Sarah and Gwen, who'd left accounting to become an advocate. The foundation's reach grew, with chapters opening in other cities. Maya's story inspired copycat lawsuits, with women and marginalized groups challenging powerful men who cheated them. She became a reluctant icon, her face on magazine covers, her name synonymous with justice. But she stayed grounded, still living in Englewood, still walking the streets where she'd grown up. The threats hadn't stopped, though they'd lessened. Maya's security guard was a fixture, but she refused to live in fear. One night, a letter Aravedno return address, just a typed note. "You think you've won, but you're still nothing." Maya burned it in her sink, watching the flames consume the words. She wasn't nothing. She was a force, and the world was starting to see it. Chloe's book hit shelves, a tawdry tell-all that painted Richard as a monster and herself as a victim. It sold well, but faded fast, overshadowed by Maya's work. Chloe tried to reach out, sending an email apologizing for her role in the divorce. Maya read it, but didn't reply. Forgiveness would come. Maybe, but not yet. She had bigger battles to fight. One battle was personal. Maya's mother, still in Bronzeville, had watched her daughters fight with quiet pride. Over dinner one night, she took Maya's hand. "You did what I couldn't," she said, her eyes wet. "You stood up." Maya hugged her, the weight of her mother's words settling deep. She'd fought for more than herself, for her mother, for Loretta, for the girl with the notebook, for every person who'd been pushed down and told to stay there. Truth Rising's first major win came that fall, a lawsuit against a developer who'd displaced a South Side community. The settlement funded new housing, and Maya's team was hailed as heroes. But she knew the real heroes were the residents who'd refused to give up. She stood with them at a press conference, letting them take the spotlight. "This is their victory," she said. "I'm just the lawyer." As winter loomed, Maya reflected on her journey. She'd lost so much: her marriage, her home, her trust, but she'd gained something greater: purpose. Richard's fortune was gone, his name disgraced, but Maya's legacy was just beginning. She wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. She was fighting for change. The system was cracked, and she'd keep hammering until it broke open. Winter settled over Chicago, but Maya Thompson was a flame that refused to flicker. Truth Rising had become a beacon, not just in the city, but across the country. Its chapters multiplied, each one a spark of hope for communities battered by greed and neglect. Maya's days were a whirlwind: court appearances, fundraisers, late-night strategy sessions with Elena and her team. She was no longer just a lawyer or an ex-wife. She was a movement, a living testament to what happened when the silenced found their voice. The community center in Bronzeville hummed with life. Kids attended after-school programs. Adults learned legal rights, and elders like Loretta shared stories that wove the community tighter. Maya often stopped by, not as a leader, but as a neighbor, listening to dreams and fears. One evening, a teenage boy approached her, shy but determined. "I'm going to law school because of you," he said. "I want to fight like you." Maya smiled, handing him her card. "Call me when you're ready," she said. "We need you." Richard's name faded from the headlines. His prison sentence a footnote in Maya's story. His companies were sold off. His properties seized to pay restitution. The millions he'd hidden were redistributed, much of it to Maya's foundation. She used it to fund scholarships, housing, and legal aid, ensuring every dollar served those he'd harmed. Chloe's book flopped, her brief fame swallowed by apathy. Maya didn't gloat, she didn't need to. Her victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in the lives she was rebuilding. The threats still came, though fewer now. Maya's security guard became a friend, his presence a reminder of the cost of her fight. She'd faced racism, betrayal, and danger, but she'd also found allies: Jamal, Sarah, Elena, Loretta, the countless strangers who'd stood with her. Their strength carried her through the darkest days, and she vowed to pay it forward. Truth Rising launched a national campaign, training activists to challenge systemic injustice. Maya spoke at its kickoff, her voice steady but fierce. "We don't just want justice," she said. "We want a world where no one has to fight for it." Chicago's elite, once Richard's shield, now courted Maya. Invitations to galas and boardrooms piled up, but she declined most, wary of their motives. She wasn't here to join their world. She was here to change it. Instead, she hosted town halls in Englewood, Auburn Gresham, Austin, places the elite ignored. She listened to stories of evictions, discrimination, lost dreams, and channeled them into action. Truth Rising's lawsuits multiplied, each one a brick in a new foundation. One crisp December night, Maya stood on the courthouse steps again, alone this time. The city sparkled, its lights a mirror of her resolve. She thought of the girl she'd been hopeful, trusting, unaware of the battles ahead. She thought of the woman she'd become, scarred but unbroken, a warrior forged in fire. The signpost was long gone, but its words lived in her: justice demands truth. She demanded it, and she'd won not just for herself, but for everyone who'd been told they didn't matter. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Elena, another case, another fight. She smiled, slipping the phone into her pocket. The road ahead was long, but she wasn't alone. The community, the movement, the truth, they were her army. Richard had tried to erase her, but she'd written her name in fire, and it would burn for generations. She walked into the night, her steps light but purposeful. The fight wasn't over, but Maya Thompson was ready. She'd crushed a fortune, but she'd built something greater, a legacy of justice, of hope, of truth rising.